Hello and welcome back to the Inside Elland Road podcast with me, Joe Donoghue, and YEP chief football writer, Graham Smith. I have to say, Graham, there is a bit of a spring in my step, if you'll excuse the pun. The international break is over. Willie Nyonto's ankle injury isn't that bad after all. Ethan Ampadu is back in the squad this weekend. We're getting an extra hour of sunlight in the evenings from Sunday onwards. What's not to love? I suppose there is a slight blemish on the good news from today's press conference, and that was the earlier news that season tickets are going up in price, regardless of the division Leeds are playing in next season. That did come as something of a surprise to us as well. It's not as though Angus Kinnear and Maury Eisenberg accidentally sent a message into a group chat featuring Leeds journalists preempting the price hike, because apparently that sort of mistake is reserved for those with the highest level of security clearance in the United States government. Graham, you've been across the season ticket stuff this morning, and we'll start there, as many of you listening, I imagine, will be season ticket holders. What is the club's position, and also what have supporters had to say on the matter?
At least offer me a drink first, Joe, before you thrust me into action. You look a bit more mustachy today than normal for some reason. I don't know what that is. And also, a point you missed in your whole spring in the step thing, isn't that an hour less that we parents get in bed on Sunday morning?
That is not my topic.
No, evidently not. So on to season tickets then. Yes, a little bit of context to this. The Supporters Trust, who are not the be-all and end-all when it comes to fans groups, but they are a fan group that interacts and engages with the club on behalf of a large number of fans, and on behalf of the wider fan base as well. They met with the COO and the CEO last week, I think, to discuss season tickets and to put across some feedback that came from their members about what they would desire to see from this year's season ticket renewal announcement. None of what they asked for is in there. They wanted a price freeze, but prices are going up. Now, prices at Leeds stayed frozen for a decade, essentially. Since that decade came to a close, prices have gone up, I think, is it 3 times? 3 and 3 or 3 and 4, something like that. This year, they are going up, and the percentage rise will depend on which tier pricing you're in. Used to be 3 tiers, it's now 2 tiers, and the tier is dependent on your tenure of season tickets, so how long you've had one. So for those with the longest tenure, who've had the season ticket the longest time, their increase will likely be greater than the increase experienced by those who've had a season ticket only in the last few years. And the reason for that is that those with the longest tenure have had the cheapest season tickets for the longest time and also continue to have the cheapest season tickets. But the club's idea is to equalize, is the new phrase they're using, not leveling up, I suppose, because it includes the word up, and up suggests things going up, and nobody likes things going up when it comes to price. So they're equalizing the season tickets with the aim that somebody and their neighbor will eventually pay the same price to sit in the same place. And there are obviously a spectrum of views when it comes to the response in the fan base on that. There will be some that originally fed back to say, look, this isn't really very fair. I'm paying a much greater fee for my seat that has exactly the same view and atmosphere as Jim, who sits next to me, who's had a season ticket 10 years longer. There'll also be people saying it is incredibly steep at a time of economic difficulty for the country and for the populace to put up your prices 14%, particularly if I'm going to then pay 14% more for a season ticket that might well be a championship season ticket next season. Now, neither of us think that it will be. We think these will be Premier League season tickets. So there's a bit of yin and yang with that, because I guess you can stomach it a bit more if the price goes up and you watch Premier League football. Conversely, if the price goes up and you find yourself watching championship football, you might be none too pleased.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of summarising what's gone on there with Leeds. And while I do think, in theory, the person that you sit next to, if you're an adult, sat next to another adult, theoretically, yes, you probably should pay the same amount as that person when you've got the same view, the same match experience. But again, equalising that over a period of years is going to be difficult. I do understand. I understand the club's stance on it. I also understand the supporters' frustration because, yeah, who wants to pay more for the same thing that they're getting for cheaper right now? I mean, it's a sign of the times, really, isn't it?
It's a
Everything's
sign of
going
the
up in
game.
price. It's a sign of the. That's what I mean. It's a sign of the game, and I don't want to go completely against modern football, but when you look at the sort of the individuals that own football clubs, and I'm not just talking about Leeds, I'm talking about the Premier League teams and most Championship clubs. I always come back to an expression that, or not an expression, a quote that Uli Hoeneß, the Bayern Munich, I think he was some form of director or chief executive. He said, and it was, if we increase season tickets, we get an extra 3 million a year in revenue. Whereas if we increase the cost of the season tickets to the fan, that's a much greater increase in terms of proportion to that person's salary or how much they have to live on. It's, I don't know, it leaves a bit of a sour taste, but then again, yeah, I'm kind of biting my tongue a little bit on the season ticket debate.
Yeah, like I would very much side on the people whose support is so heavily relied on by the club. And there's a reason why there's this Stop Exploiting Loyalty campaign going on, particularly with Premier League clubs at the minute. I remember a couple of years ago somebody saying that the Premier League clubs could afford to charge nothing and for games, and they would still be okay. I don't think that's the case for a Championship club. But at the same time, you had the Huddersfield owner on, I think he was on BBC last night, talking about, well, we're going to post a £20 million loss. They've had to put their season tickets up. Hey, make better decisions. Pay terrible players less. Stop hiring rubbish managers and then having to fire them and pay compo. And this isn't just aimed at Huddersfield. This is aimed at every club, really. You end up paying massive losses when you make bad decisions. And it's not just the case that you have to pay the going rate. That is a part of it. But also, if you make bad recruitment decisions, you end up paying for it through the nose. And then what you're doing is passing that on to the supporter, which does leave a bit of a bad taste. But a club like Leeds in the Championship, similarly, I suppose, to a club like Huddersfield, lower down, they do need season ticket money because they're not in the Premier League and they're not completely awash with broadcast revenue and the kind of commercial deals that come with Premier League status. But I don't know. Yes, it's a business. I don't like particularly that it's run as a business, and at the same time, if it was run like a goodwill venture, it would probably go out of business, and then the people who ran it would just get chased out of town. So it's almost there's almost an element of just gritting your teeth and settling for the fact that football is horrifically capitalist and there's nothing we can do.
I think that's enough geopolitics for the first 10 minutes of a Leeds United podcast, to be honest. The anti-capitalist Inside Elland Road podcast with comrade Graham Smith. I think the final word that I'll say on that is ultimately shit rolls downhill, doesn't it? So it shouldn't, but supporters shouldn't be footing a bill for bad decisions that are made by executives, and that's of all clubs. But let's get on to some good news then. Daniel Farke had his pre-Swansea City press conference today, and was expected to provide an update on Willie Nyonto, Ethan Ampadu, Patrick Bamford, and Max Wöber as well. And it was all broadly quite good news.
Yeah. You get a comeback. You get a comeback. You get a comeback. You might get a comeback, Willie. Yeah, it's all good news, really. Max Wöber back in team training today. I doubt very much whether he'd be in the matchday squad for Swansea with just maybe 2 team training sessions under his belt after knee surgery. Ethan Ampadu's the big one. That's the big news, because him being back in team training and being in the squad, we confirmed in the squad for Swansea, is massive for Leeds. Last Friday we were chatting, and I was going to write a line about Ethan Ampadu coming back, being able to unlock Gnonto at 10, because with Ampadu in there, it would give Farke the peace of mind to be a bit riskier at 10 and play a more offensive-minded and less pressy, less distance-covering player. And then, of course, I sat down, got a legal stream of the Italy under-21s Netherlands game, and watched on in horror as about 40 minutes, Willy Gnonto tried to get the ball back, turned on his ankle, had treatment for a minute or two, tried to play on, sank to his haunches, limped about, and then eventually was replaced on 45 minutes. And I thought, oh, great. There's that lovely theory about Ampadu unlocking Gnonto completely out the window. But Farke still has a hope that he might be available for Saturday. So it can't be a serious ligament injury. It may be just, I don't know, a light sprain.
Yeah, I saw a video yesterday of purporting to be Willy Gnonto at the training grounds, and he didn't have like a boot or protective anything. It looked like he was pretty much involved with the squad in that lighter session that Farke mentioned. Seemed to be pretty fine, in good spirits. So that was hopeful at the very least. Would you play him against Swansea, even if you have him in the squad? Would you play him? Because I think if it's a different opponent, maybe I'm taking that risk. But I think, given what he said about, more recovery time gives Willy Gnonto the opportunity to get back to his best sooner, rather than, having to blood him maybe a little bit prematurely. I think I leave him out against Swansea just to give him that extra recovery time.
Yeah, I would completely agree. It's not like they don't have another hugely exciting winger full of potential sitting on the bench ready to come on if James or Solomon happen to be flagging. You've got Largi Ramazani. You also have Isaac Schmidt, who you could bring on and play out wide. There are options for Farke. So the wing area is probably the area where you've got the most luxury to be able to do that. And I probably wouldn't be averse to seeing Gnonto sit out. Just let that ankle recover a bit more and then have him fully fit for the run-in.
Yeah, I think that's the play. I'd be surprised if Gnonto played a part against Swansea, but again, don't rule it out, because Farke knows and mentioned the quality that he has coming off the bench. We saw it at Swansea earlier this season when he came off the bench to score the winner in that 4-3 game. So yeah, don't rule it out, but broadly very good news, because there was some suggestion that he might be out for 3 or 4 weeks, and given how we've only got about 6 weeks until that final day game against Plymouth, that pretty much rules him out for the bulk of the run-in. So to not have to deal with that is a massive plus. To have Ampadu back already 1 or 2 weeks ahead of schedule is also huge for Leeds, not only because of the quality that he brings, but just that defensive protection, the opportunity that it gives Farke to rotate or to rest some of the midfield options, play different combinations depending on which opponent he's coming up against, which type of profile of opposition midfielder. And what you were saying as well, the theory that having Ampadu as the deep six anchoring that midfield and offering additional protection does give Farke the opportunity to experiment a little bit more with Gnonto in the number 10 position if Brendan Aronson isn't as revitalised as Farke suggests that he is after the international break.
Yeah, Aronson didn't go away and suffer national embarrassment and disgrace along with his US men's national team colleagues. They had a bit of a shocker, didn't they?
Yeah.
Losing to Jesse Marsh's Canada. Yeah, I think the rest will have done Aronson good. And look, we've said it so many times. He's played a lot of football. Just need a break. Needed to sit down. Sit yourself down, son, in Betty's. Have yourself some tea. Read a nice book. It's lovely at the minute.
Does Betty's have a hyperbaric chamber? That must be new since the last time I was in there.
Yeah, and maybe they've just left him in a hyperbaric chamber for 2 weeks, just pumping him full of really great oxygen. He's going to come back entirely oxygenized. Yeah, we'll see, won't we? If there's a bit more zip to him, and if he's got his head up a little bit more, because was as much a confidence thing for me as it was anything else.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that potentially having that break, because it is, again, he's a player who typically has come from European football with Red Bull Salzburg and then was with Union Berlin last year. You get a winter break. He didn't have that winter break, and basically his output has fallen off. Well, not fallen off the cliff, but
It has. It has.
it has, but it hasn't fallen off a cliff. Suggests it's gone right down. It's diminished. It's diminished to a point where it's been quite noticeable. 2 weeks with no football, not going away with the United States, as he has been previously in pretty much every international break. If you're going to be rejuvenated at any point, it's going to be now. So I think we might see a Brendan Aronson at the against Swansea like he was at the beginning of the season. It would be really nice to see, because the impression that you get is that he's a really nice lad, and is genuinely a very hard worker. Just maybe has been lacking a little bit of confidence and lacking a little bit of ability at times. So it'd be really, really nice and probably cathartic for him if he did have a good game against Swansea. If he didn't, or rather, if he doesn't have a good game against Swansea, I suppose you do. Farke has been sort of talking up the idea of Gnonto at that 10 a little bit more and more. Certainly did today. So what I'm trying to say is it's all going to be fine in the number 10 position. It's all going to be fine.
Yeah, it is good that there is an option though, and that Farke has kind of recognized that as an option.
Yeah.
And it's not just kind of pie in the sky, and there is a bit of backup, and maybe that even takes the pressure off a little bit of Aronson. Maybe it'll spur him on. Maybe the idea that Gnonto's coming up behind him, and once he gets over this little ankle blip, could be a real option to replace him. Maybe that'll just spur him on. I mean, it's not like he's not trying, and it's not like he's not getting into good positions, because he's quite often finding himself with chances. He just hasn't been able to take them. He just hasn't been able to create chances either of late. So let's see what he can come up with on Saturday after a break.
Yeah, Swansea are going to be the side who are visiting Elland Road. Not the most formidable of opponents that Leeds could face coming off the back of an international break, but as Farke pointed out, Leeds might be at a slight disadvantage in terms of the number of players that have been away on international duty. And Junior Firpo getting back later today, probably while we're recording this, and only having pretty much one full training session before going straight into the starting 11. You don't get that much opportunity to do work on tactics or team tactics, but I suppose into your 39th league game of the season, you should probably know that like the back of your hand by now. Looking at the Swansea team, Josh Cullen, I think, or is it Liam Cullen? Liam Cullen is the danger man with 10 goals. You've got Zan Vipotnik, the striker. He's got 5. You've got Ronald, the right winger, who's got 6 assists. That is Lewis O'Brien? Yeah, Lewis O'Brien in central midfield. Looks to have done all right since arriving there in January presumably. And Josh Tyman at left back has got 4 assists and 2 goals. From what you can remember at the Liberty Stadium or the Swansea.com stadium, I beg your pardon, earlier this season, Graham, what do you make of Swansea arriving at Elland Road this weekend?
In years to come, in like 10, 15 years, we're going to be looking up Lewis O'Brien for some reason, and we're going to be utterly convinced that he played 15 games for Leeds. We're going to be absolutely convinced of it because he was linked with the club so many times, and they kept looking and looking and looking at him, but he never actually made the move. I don't think it'll be anywhere near as open and as frenetic as it was down there. I think they will come here and I think they'll try and look after themselves a little bit more than they did back then. It felt like chaotic, that game, like really chaotic. And I don't think that'll be the case. I think Leeds will dominate possession, or at least I don't think it'll be like a 70-30 split, but I think they'll have most of the ball, more of the ball. And I think it's just up to Leeds to make a breakthrough and get that first goal. I think that'll be really, really key, particularly in this game, because a lot of people have what happened last season in the back of their minds. What happened after the international break, and there will be this fear that will take on a life of its own and grow exponentially, that it's going to happen again if Leeds come out and make a poor start. But we've been saying it all season how good they are at bouncing back, and I fully expect them to bounce back from the QPR game. They've had a break. They've had, even players who went away and played have had a break from the relentless kind of mental ticking over that there is when you're in a championship promotion race. I mean, just probably obsessing over it and thinking about it all the time, game after game after game. It probably done the players good to get away and play with their countries, just for a complete change of scenery and a change of rhythm, and just to think about something else. To think about Bellamy's voice instead of Farke's, or whatever it might be. So I would expect Leeds in general, not just Aronson, to look a bit refreshed, and we'll want to see that, because there is this theory that last year they ran out of steam. That the players ran out of gas. That's why I asked the question of Farke today. What lessons could you learn from the way things ended last season to make sure it goes better this season? But he's very, very keen to always put a line in the sand between that team and this team and say that they're two very different scenarios. What do you make of his? I'm not accusing anyone, but there were definitely some players who knew they could be in the Premier League whether we went up or not. What do you make of that?
I make of it exactly what Daniel Farke wants us to make of it. And he is saying just enough to, I don't know, evoke a certain or elicit a certain reaction in people's minds when they think back to that team and the personnel that were in that team. I think he's certainly not accusing anyone of downing tools. He's certainly not doing that, but he is illuminating the fact that maybe players who were playing at 100% were then maybe playing at 98 or 99% during that run-in, when things began to shape up as though it was going to be the playoffs rather than automatic promotion. It sounded a lot like that. And again, he's never going to name names. He's far too professional for that, and to be honest, far too savvy for that. But yeah, I think reading between the lines, we know what's really being said there.
You wonder as well. I mean, your natural inclination, particularly the older you get as a male watching football, your natural inclination is just to be furious about everything. And I would love nothing more to get really angry and go on a massive rant about how disgusting it is that they get paid this much and they don't give 100%. I would see it more as a subconscious thing, as more of a, you're absolutely battered. You've been kicked from pillar to post all season. It's a crazy league that asks an enormous amount of you physically, and you're getting down towards the last few games, and your body is telling you, just please stop. Please don't do that sprint. Just don't do that sprint quite like you did the last one. And maybe there's just not enough up here in the head to fight that feeling and to go against it and to give your absolute everything. And maybe there was like a subconscious taking the foot off the pedal a little bit, out of as much mental and physical exhaustion as any knowledge that, as any kind of I'm all right, Jack attitude. I mean, that would really be, if it was an attitude thing and not a subconscious thing, it would be totally unforgivable. And I would want them flogged in the streets. Hanging still good for him.
Extreme. Again, with the violence with you, it's always the first port of call. I was going to use an analogy of like, well, when you've got your flight gets delayed or cancelled and you think, or your train or something, and you think, it's actually all right. Like your train, you think, okay, well, I'm going to get a refund for this. Like, it's not the end of the world. Or your flight gets delayed or cancelled and you're like, that's all right, I've got travel insurance. Like that could have been sort of in the back of your mind. You're not as pissed off as you could have been. That might have been the sort of the emotion that was subconsciously was in the back of certain players' minds towards the back end of last season. Obviously, you want them, you want their attitude and their application scrutinized to the nth degree, and then to put them in the stocks and throw pelt, actually, not throw, pelt them with rotten fruit. That's the only thing.
I want
that
their entrails on a plate.
There we go. And if anyone can hear, Graham is getting slowly further away from the microphone as he decides to. He's getting more agitated. He's going to start shadowboxing in the room where he podcasts in a second. Give him to me. Let me at him. Yeah, I don't think there will have been, because they're all professionals at the end of the day. I don't think there was any downing of tools. But as we suggest, and as Farkas suggested, maybe subconsciously there was a little bit of taking the foot off the pedal, and I think that's what he means by that. This time around, I don't think that'll be the case.
Maybe also a little bit of self-protection creeping in, like thinking, oh, here's a 50-50. If I get smashed here and do my ACL, or my cruciate goes, or my Achilles pops, I'm not going to play in the Premier League next season. Maybe that. I don't think players have enough time to think all of that when the ball is spinning on the turf between you and an opponent, and you've got the choice whether to go in full welly or to maybe just stand them up and not engage. But I do think that there's an element, maybe again subconsciously, of protecting yourself. Some players don't do it. I mean, you remember Gaetano Berardi literally putting his knee on the line when he knew he was out of contract at Leeds in the final bit of that season, the Bielsa promotion season. Some players simply don't have that kind of self-protection. They just have full on, I will get this ball regardless of circumstance. Dan James in the playoff final, going for a ball that they had no business going for. I mean, it was foolish, really. It was really silly of him, but it was the most commitment that you could want to see from a man under the height of 5'7" at Wembley. I mean, you're not going to see that from some players, but there are players that you will see it from. When you look at this team, Joe, and I was going to ask you, because I'm a really horrible person, who do you think might protect themselves in the final league? But instead,
I don't think we can answer that.
Instead, I'll ask you, what do you see in this team that makes you think it's not going to happen again?
Those clauses not being in the players' contracts.
Yes.
that's kind of the biggest one for me. Players, if the clauses aren't there, then ultimately there's not that subconscious insurance policy, if you will. I just think it feels like a very tight unit, and again, that could just be me covering Leeds United every day and getting a false sense of things, but it does genuinely feel as though there is a lot of interlinking between the different dressing room groups. Certainly more than, like, going back to the relegation season. Do you remember what that dressing room was like? It felt cliquey, didn't it? It felt as though, you had the younger lads. You also then had the experienced, ex-Bielsa players. You had the European signings, the Americans. It felt very sort of detached. This one, I do see a bit of crossover, like Autanaka, Joshua Giavogi, and Isaac Schmidt all going for sushi together, that sort of thing. Like that does suggest that there is a decent level of camaraderie. You saw in the recent promotional material that Leeds put out. Joe Rodon was going in on Brendan Aronson a little bit, going like, yeah, he's definitely the fastest because he weighs nothing. And it's like, I would not put, if you put Brendan Aronson and Joe Rodon in a lift together and then they were stuck there for 6 hours, I genuinely wouldn't think that the two of them would come out of it as friends. But if they hadn't previously known each other, but clearly after playing together for the past year, Rodon feels comfortable enough that he can rip the proverbial out of him on camera. So there is an element of that, I think.
Yeah, I always try not to buy in too much into what we see, particularly when there's cameras rolling. I know you're a bit younger and a bit less.
I'm not going to stand for that.
That's nice about you, but I do think that even if they disliked one another, I think players like this in this team have enough about them as characters and have enough self-pride that they'd want to absolutely go to war in the
Yeah,
final 8
absolutely.
games. I mean, even if just pick two, like completely at random, even if right, Rodon hated Melier, right? You're not telling
Interesting
me
pick.
you're not telling me that he's not going to throw himself in the way of a shot, knowing that he might horribly contort his body in order to dig Melier out if Melier gives the ball away, or that Melier is not going to dive at the feet of a striker if Rodon misses a tackle and lets someone. Well, they just are, because they're, like you said earlier, they're professionals, but they do have enough about them, and we've seen
Yeah.
enough from them this season to suggest that they do want it. Where I think there might be a slight question mark remaining over this team is when another team properly takes it to them, particularly in an early kickoff. Like when Pompey beat them up, as they did. And I don't want to categorize that game as Leeds being bullied, because I thought Pompey played football too, but they did beat them up in the duels. And that's not the first time. Farke has highlighted it before, games where his players weren't 100% committed in physical battles early in the game and let the opponent establish a little bit of dominance or a bit of momentum. That's where we want to see this team stand up a little bit in the final 8 games and show that they are absolutely capable of standing up for themselves, standing up for the promotion bid, standing up for one another. But I think even if you had 2 players in this team who could not stand the side of one another, they would still be doing their utmost to play together to win, because these people, they want to win everything that they ever enter in their lives. I mean, actually, if we go back to things you see on camera, all those little competitions they do that are filmed where they're chipping footballs into a massively large can of horrific energy drink, or they're trying to hit the crossbar, or they have one of those horrible influencers come down to do like a shooting thing. They want to win every single thing that they do. When they play table tennis, they want to win. When they game on the PlayStation, they want to win. So yeah, even if they weren't good mates, I think they'll be good teammates.
Also, just score first. Like at Ellen Road this season, Leeds have scored 17 times the first goal. They've conceded the first goal twice. I think out of those 17, I think they've gone on to win 15 of them, if my maths is correct. So just do that. Do that in your 4 home games, and then you know what? If you absolutely need to crawl over the finishing line by drawing a couple of away games, you'll be fine because you've already got 92 points from those home matches.
17 times. So they've almost met the 80% threshold for applying for renewing their Premier League status, Joe. That's what you're saying here.
Very good. Yeah, I like that.
In the remaining games,
yeah.
they just need to do the same.
Yeah, they do. And for the record, I do think they will do that against Swansea this weekend. Swansea have lost 10 of the last 14. I've not checked that, and I know Adam Pope listens to this podcast, so I'm relying on Popey here. His maths being correct, but 10 defeats, even if it's not right, 8, 9, 10 defeats from the last 14. It's a bit indicative, isn't it? Even if they have got better defensively since Alan Sheehan came in as interim boss. So
I like the way
yeah.
you covered yourself there. Even if it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or 11 defeats in the last 14, any of those numbers will do.
Look, I don't know what Popey got at O-level maths, right? I know that I got an A in my GCSE, right? I know that I scraped one. I was just above the A mark threshold for my GCSE maths. Didn't actually qualify for A-level maths, which you could probably class as Premier League. But I got what I needed. We should move on to discuss the other element to this weekend's fixture between Leeds and Swansea. That is that this weekend's game is designated as the primary memorial fixture for the anniversary of Chris Loftus and Kevin Spate, their passing. It's obviously 25 years, which is obviously a big anniversary, and there are plans in place for wreaths to be laid by both team captains before kickoff, a minute's applause before kickoff. There'll be a message on the big screen at Ellen Road on 25 minutes, and also the chairman will be laying a wreath at the Chris and Kev plaque outside the East Stand as well. Again, it's a very emotional time of year for Leeds fans. Certainly of the friends and families of Chris and Kev. And 25 years, it kind of has that feel to it that it's a big anniversary. It's so long that they've been gone, and I think what the club are doing and what the club are proposing for the actual anniversary on the 5th of April at Luton Town are appropriate for this time of year.
Yeah, emotional is the right word. I think it can be hard to understand externally sometimes just the strength of feeling that there is around certain topics at football clubs. And for Leeds fans, the sense of injustice still burns incredibly, and it's an enormously sensitive subject for the club, and one that club chiefs really need to get their heads around, so that they can make the appropriate arrangements, and so that the families and the fan base, the wider fan base, feel like, yeah, the club got this right. They got the right level of attention or whatever it is for the memorial, and particularly with it being a big anniversary as well. What really touched me was Gareth Senior, who has found himself somewhat reluctantly, I think, in a kind of spokesperson type role when it comes to a lot of these things for Chris and Kev. He said that he didn't want to dwell too much on the events of that night because everyone knows now, and that is one thing that I think is really important for Leeds fans, is that it has been almost universally accepted that Leeds fans were not at fault that night, and this was murder. This was not a fight that got out of hand. This was two guys who went to follow their football team who were murdered, tragically and wrongly. And he didn't want to go too much into what happened on the night because everyone knew what had happened and it's all been said. But he wanted to see something good come from that, and that's why they're using a big event and a fundraising push to create funds for a very, very worthwhile charity, Candlelighters, a children's cancer charity in Leeds, local charity as well. And they wanted something really positive to come out of something really dark, which I think is great, because you can have memorial events and people will inevitably be upset and sad because dates do matter. Days when you mark the passing of a loved one, they do matter and they are more emotional. But at the same time, if something positive can come from it, then I think that it would be an appropriate thing. And I think that the families are right behind that. And I think they very much wanted something good to come from this year's marking of the memory. So yeah, it'll be another emotional one at Elland Road.
Yeah, and discussions have taken place between Leeds and Luton and the relevant authorities to have Chris and Kev's memory marked and respected on the actual anniversary, which is the day that Leeds do play Luton at Kenilworth Road. So I think you have to applaud the club, or both clubs, and the EFL if those things do come to pass, because again, it's out of the ordinary. Remembering murdered football supporters is not something which takes place at every game. But doing it in the proper fashion, and clubs collaborating to recognise that some things are much more important than a game of football, I think that should be recognised.
Absolutely.
Moving on to other Leeds United matters, and there was in today's press conference a mention of young striker Harry Gray. Was it you who asked that question, Graham?
Twas I.
Yes.
Twas I.
It was you. You actually wrote something in your newsletter about, in fact, the newsletter was about keeping hold of Harry Gray amid reports that Big Six clubs would be interested. And we discussed that on last week's episode, and the newsletter sort of built upon that. You asked Daniel Farker whether there was the possibility that, given Harry is training with the senior team, pretty much every day now, that he might be in line to get minutes or whatnot. I suppose the question I want to ask you is, because most people recognize that a 16-year-old with no prior professional experience is probably not going to be the answer in a championship title run-in right now. Like that's fairly obvious. especially when you have the league's second top goal scorer as your first choice, who is more often than not readily available. I suppose the question I have to ask you is, do you think that Harry Gray's Leeds' fourth choice striker right now?
Yeah, he absolutely is. Yeah, I think you're right in that there's no pressing need to throw him into action right now. And Farker recognised that, you know, to have him training with us and anyone who trains with us is an option for the squad. That's one thing. But to say that he's your starting striker when you've got Joel Peru, who you know can do it at this level, has done it at this level now for 4 seasons in a row. Probably going to finish the season with 20 goals, you would imagine. Then you've got Mateo Joseph, who still has a huge amount of potential and a lot of developing to do, but can score a goal at this level, can definitely annoy defenders and occupy them at this level and make chances for himself or for others. And then you've got Patrick Bamford, who's fit again and maybe not match fit, but he's back in training and has now made himself an option for the squad. So there isn't a need to throw a player in before he might be quite ready for it into what's going to be a pressure cooker for the next 6 weeks. It would be an enormous thing, even if he has the same mentality or a better mentality than his brother, for whom playing even at the highest level just appears to be water off a duck's back. Even if he has that mentality, it's still a big thing. And what would be really nice is if Leeds just went out and blitzed these last few games and wrapped it up mathematically nice and early, so that you could maybe have a look at Harry Gray. But even in that circumstance, I don't know that Farker just throws him in, because he's got this whole, yes, it's not a gift, not won in the lottery. I wish you could play a lottery that would win you minutes for your club, because that's a lottery that I would play. I don't currently play any lotteries, but I would put £1 a week at least, or join a syndicate that would give me a chance of playing professional minutes for my team. But he doesn't just give opportunities away. He always likes to say they're earned and specifies why they were earned. So I think it's probably unlikely. It's probably something really bad will happen or something really good will happen. Those are the only circumstances in which we see Harry Gray, I think, play for Leeds this season. But the fact that he's even an option in training with the first team should probably tell you all you need to know about what kind of a talent Leeds think they have.
Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty nicely. Something bad or something good has to happen at both ends of the goodness and badness spectrum, the extreme ends, shall we say. We did have the international break over the past fortnight or so. What were your highlights? Because I have a highlight, and it actually involved Northern Ireland. Graham,
Don't you
what were your highlights?
Don't you say it? Don't you say it?
I'm going to say it. There were some fantastic goals scored in a 5-1 win by Sweden against Northern Ireland earlier this week. Brilliant win. Some great assists as well in that game. I think the first assist in that game was very good, and then there was, I think it was the fourth goal, was an absolute just wonder strike.
Wasn't even the best goal scored for me. The last goal was the best goal scored.
Who scored those? I know it was Isaac Price got the one singular goal for Northern Ireland in that game. It's just there were so many Sweden goals. I can't remember.
Right, enough. Like, listen, okay. I'm only going to say this one time. We were missing significant players, right? Like Connor Bradley. Any team would miss a Connor Bradley. Liverpool's only committed right back. And we are a very, very young squad, developing, and there's plenty of reason for optimism, loads of potential. Some of those players are going to be very, very good players. We also created 4 very good chances. We could have easily lost that game 5-4. I would have accepted a 5-4 defeat. Okay, we could have maybe lost it 7 or 8-4. But the fact that we created those chances is good enough for me. Conceding 5 goals in a friendly to Sweden is not my topic.
Was this not a Sweden team that had previously lost, and I mean like 3 days earlier, had lost 1-0 to Luxembourg?
In the words of David Healy, I have no idea how they lost to Luxembourg because absolutely they must have put some competition winners out or something. Like something very odd must have happened. Maybe they do have a lottery in which you can play for your country, and the lottery winners took that game. But
It'd be very Scandinavian, wouldn't it?
yeah,
I'm not going to do an impression because
it was probably they gave some rehabilitated former convicts the chance to play for their country as part of their rehabilitation, because studies show that if they play international football, they become even better citizens. So I would imagine it was something like that. Something strange definitely happened for them to lose to Luxembourg, because they're a very good team. I mean, I know that Isak's not playing at the kind of club that he really wants to be playing at right now, but he's going to go on and play for a big team at some point.
I did hear Gary Neville suggest that Isak would want to play for, a Liverpool or a Barcelona or a Manchester United. I did wonder where he was possibly thinking that Isak might have a hankering or a desire to play for a lower mid-table Premier League team when he already plays for an upper mid-table Premier League team. But we're getting away from the international break from a Leeds perspective. I think your favourite moment from a Leeds point of view was Junior Firpo having his kids there to watch him score a penalty and win for the Dominican Republic for the first time. That must be a nice moment.
Yeah, it must have been. And the suffering that he must have endured flying from England to Dominican Republic with two small children, it must have made it all worthwhile, or just about worthwhile. I'm not sure that even scoring a goal for my country in front of my kids would make it worth flying that distance with my children, unless, of course, he flew on ahead earlier and they joined him later, in which case it's absolutely fine for him, but not so fine for his lady wife. Yeah, very special moment for him. I'm sure he's had lots of special moments already in what has been a fairly brief but significant, eventful international career. This really could be one of the years of maybe the year of his career. If he wins promotion with Leeds and goes and plays in the Gold Cup with Dominican Republic, I mean, also throw in either staying at Leeds or getting a move to a new club. I mean, could he have had any more significant summers than this? I don't think he could.
No, he can just sail off into the sunset and retire and think, you know what, I've done really well here.
Retire at 28 when you can be earning 40 grand a week somewhere else.
I'm not suggesting that he retires. He's just changed agency, for example, for Christ's sake. He's definitely not retiring.
They wouldn't let him. They wouldn't let him retire.
But the Dominican Republic, yeah, you bet they wouldn't. Yeah, he's having a great season. But probably the best thing to come out of the international break, from an individual's perspective, was Ao Tanaka qualifying for the World Cup with Japan, with matches to spare. They beat Bahrain 2-0 to confirm that last week, and then they drew 0-0 with Saudi Arabia, which Tanaka played the full 90 in, and then he's flown back since. Yeah, congratulations to Ao Tanaka. And that does actually bring me onto a recurring theme. It's not a regularly recurring theme of this podcast, but we have referenced it previously, and for some reason I've got my phone on the floor, which is where I'm going to have to go. So if I duck out of camera for a brief moment, that's where I am, while I unplug it. There we go, and fire up Instagram to see Tanaka's Poetry Corner once more, because he did caption his latest post in typically Tanaka fashion. Thank you for your support. I can still do more, and I will do my best to grow more. You know what? Profound, touching, concise but impactful, I think is how I describe it.
That reads to me. It reads, if I was to translate that further, it would read, sorry we didn't beat Saudi Arabia. We definitely should have. Please don't worry. We will be better than this in the future.
Yeah, but that's just a bit too wordy for him. I mean, we know that he doesn't really like to talk that much. So
yes, don't we ever? Yeah, that was a good individual outcome of the international break. Isaac Schmidt getting 2 caps for Switzerland, another very good individual outcome. He played 90 odd minutes across 2 games, started in Belfast in a very lucky to get a 1-1 draw with Northern Ireland, Switzerland. Very lucky indeed. Isaac Bryce had a glorious chance to make it 2-1, having scored a screamer to make it 1-0. Yeah, he didn't really get involved too much, Schmidt. He created a bit of a half chance by bursting into the box on the left-hand side, played as a kind of right wing back or attacking right back. And then in the second half, he had a shot blocked at the back post when he arrived onto a decent cross. But he wasn't really involved in many flashpoints. I thought they were pretty poor, to be honest. Switzerland, I expected a bit more from them, particularly with all the possession they had. They didn't really create a great deal from it. And then he played the last, 25, 30 minutes of their second game against Luxembourg.
The mighty Luxembourg.
The mighty Luxembourg. So, yeah, he's now played more minutes of international football and European football this season than he's played championship football in England. And he gave that interview to a Swiss broadcaster, didn't he, saying that he's still remaining patient, but he's inevitably wondering what next, having barely featured at all this season. And I think that's fair. If Leeds go up, he's not played in the championship. What would make you think he's going to get an opportunity at all? I would say a loan exit or even a permanent exit would be his future if Leeds go up. I don't know. I wouldn't get the vibe that suddenly Farke's going to start trusting him in the Premier League. And it's not like you can say Firpo has been available for every single game this season and nailed down that place, because he did have a little bit of a dip in form. He had a bit of an injury. He came out. Byram went in. So Schmidt has been third choice left back, and you'd probably have to say his third choice right back as well. Now, Ampadu went in and played at right back, didn't he? So, yeah, it's difficult to see. It's difficult to see a future absolutely blossoming at Leeds, but you never know. You never know what can happen. Managerial changes. Somebody might see him in a different light, and he might get an opportunity. But at least the fact that he's played for his country boosts his profile a little bit more and gives him a little bit more of a spring in his step. But as we've said before, I thought he's been lively enough when we've seen him. We just haven't seen enough of him to really form a judgment on whether or not he's good enough defensively and offensively.
Yeah, I think that's a nice summary of Isaac Schmidt. What else do we have over the international break? Manor Solomon got a very nice assist in Israel's win over Estonia. Charlie Crew captained Wales's under-19 side, but unfortunately they did not qualify for the under-19 Euros this summer. We will not be talking about Rory Mahadi, who remained on the bench, and Scotland's under-21s against Iceland's under-21s, or the final scoreline in that game. If you really want to know, go and look at it yourself. Mateo Joseph played and scored for Spain's 21s. Willie Nyonton obviously got injured, but not too badly. For Italy, Ilya Gruev played for Bulgaria. And yeah, the Welsh lot. Carl Darlow seems to be the number one now under Craig Bellamy for Wales. Joe Roden and Dan James also playing against Kazakhstan and North Macedonia. For a second, I thought, oh, well, Dan James will reunite with Gianni Alioski, but they didn't cross over, I don't think.
No, there was a month. There was a month in between Alioski's departure and Dan James' arrival, so he didn't get the pleasure of meeting the Macedonian madman who has had a really weird last year. He went to Saudi before it was cool and before private investment fund bought up those 75% shares in those 4 clubs. And then when the big influx of foreign talent came in, he was squeezed out because you can have 10 foreigners in your squad, 2 of whom have to be under 21. And even Firmino, who was captain of Alioski's club, he's been squeezed out and deregistered as well since January. So Alioski hasn't played league football since the first 4 games of the last season. But then they registered him for the, what do you call it? Is the AFC Champions Cup?
Yeah.
Elite, whatever league. Basically their Champions League, isn't it? So he's played in that.
Just got different letters in front of it, Graham. It's UEFA, AFC, Champions League. Same
It
thing.
just confuses me. There's too many tournaments. So yeah, Alioski's had a bit of a weird time of it. But I mean, he's been paid presumably a fairly decent whack just to train. So I could do that job. You know, if someone was to say to me, "Do you want to do this job in the sunshine?" I could probably bring myself, knowing that there'll be no jeopardy as well at the end of it. I could probably run around for that many thousands a week. Could you?
YEP chief football writer sends "come and get me" plea to to Saudi Arabian newspaper sector.
Not to Saudi Arabia though, because my China doll skin would not survive. I think in the blistering heat, I'd need somewhere a bit closer to home. Did you mention Diogo Monteiro scoring for Portugal?
No, I didn't, because I was planning on writing something this week about that, but ultimately I feel like his lead story kind of is written. He hasn't
fizzled out.
come up. He hasn't come up to the seniors like James DeBayo has, and there is that demarcation between the 21s and the seniors. I have no doubt that he is a very accomplished player. Otherwise, Leeds wouldn't have signed him, and Portugal's under-20s wouldn't keep calling him up. But Farke's just not fancied him. I think that's really the be-all and end-all of Diogo Monteiro's story. I know he was injured at the beginning of the season or midway through the season, but seems to have come back and done all right. But yeah, I wonder whether he will move on in the summer.
Speaking of 21s, very, very sad note. We won't end on this note because it's not like us to end on a sad note. But Morten Spencer, Norwegian youth international, who came to Leeds United Academy from Sunderland, I believe, and was fairly highly rated at one point. Played for the 18s, played 20 odd games for the 21s, left the club in the summer when I think his contract was up, and joined Derby County. He turned 21 earlier this month, and he's had to retire from a cardiac issue, which is just horrible. Just horrible news for a player. For any player to retire before their time is sad. But when he's not been able to, he's signed a pro deal at Leeds. He's not played any senior football. He's not made a breakthrough. He's not really been able to play in front of a massive crowd or, really achieve his dreams. I mean, he's lived the dream, I suppose, for the last few years of being a professional footballer, but he's not really achieved what they've set out to achieve. And it feels like it's just been stripped away from him in a very, very cruel fashion.
Yeah, really, really harsh one for him. He was always very versatile and dependable at the under-21s whenever we saw him. I believe he went to Derby after leaving Leeds. But yeah, he hasn't really had the chance to realise that dream as a professional. But yeah, wish him all the best in whatever he does next, and hope that good things come his way. We'll finish on our usual predictions and expected lineups for the Swansea game. Graham, can you give us your prediction and who you think is going to be in the 11 for Leeds?
Okay. I think I might see. Might I see Ampadu? No. It's too soon. No, he couldn't. He couldn't possibly. Could he? No, I don't think so. I'm going to say he's on the bench. So I'll say Melier, Bogle, Firpo, Rodon Stroik, Rothwell, Tanaka, James, Solomon, Aronson, Peru. And I think that they will win by 2-0. And I think that the goals will come from Peru and Aronson.
Interesting. I'm going to go with the same 11. I think Ampadu will come on at some point, but actually, no, I don't think Ampadu will come on at some point because I don't think Leeds will need him. I think it's going to be a 3-0 win to Leeds. I think they're going to score very early, come out the blocks, and from there, Swansea won't have a game plan to combat that, because they'll have come to set up and frustrate. So if they concede early, then the game's a foregone conclusion by that point. So I'm going 3-0 and the same lineup as Graham. We'll catch up with you next week after. Is the midweek game next week? Is it Borough? No, that's the week after, isn't it? So it'll be before the Luton game next next Saturday, I believe. And yeah, hopefully Leeds are on to 83 points rather than just 80. And we'll have to wait and see what Sheffield United and Burnley do as well. But that's all from us on the Inside Allen Road podcast this week. I've been Joe Donoghue, joined by YEP Chief Football Writer Graham Smith. Bye for now.
Bye.